Love rarely disappears the day someone leaves. It disappears much earlier, while both people are still standing in the same room, speaking the same words, following the same routines. That is the part almost no one notices. Everyone remembers the goodbye, but almost no one remembers the thousand invisible moments that quietly erased it long before. The terrifying truth is that most people are never abandoned without warning. They are abandoned without understanding the warnings. The smile still exists. The conversations still happen. The relationship still looks alive from the outside. But underneath it, something has already stopped reaching for you. And by the time you finally feel the silence, the decision has already been made inside someone else's mind. The ending wasn't sudden. You were simply the last person to know it had already begun. That is what makes silent love so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It slowly changes the emotional atmosphere until everything familiar begins to feel strangely distant. You start wondering why conversations no longer carry warmth, why your excitement seems to echo without being returned, why the smallest moments suddenly feel heavier than they used to. Nothing dramatic has happened, yet everything feels different. Your mind searches for one mistake because believing in one mistake is easier than accepting that emotional distance is usually built from hundreds of invisible moments instead of one unforgettable event. Most people think love dies because of betrayal, conflict, or some catastrophic event. Those things can certainly end relationships, but psychological detachment usually begins much earlier. It begins when one person quietly stops feeling emotionally understood. Human beings don't measure relationships by grand gestures nearly as much as they measure them by emotional safety. Every conversation either confirms that someone feels seen or reminds them that they are emotionally alone. Those tiny experiences accumulate until the brain quietly rewrites the entire relationship. The frightening part is that this process happens beneath conscious awareness. By the time someone realizes they no longer feel connected, their emotions have often been drifting away for months. The human mind protects itself from emotional disappointment in strange ways. When repeated moments fail to create the comfort or excitement someone unconsciously expects, the brain begins lowering emotional investment. It doesn't announce this decision. It simply stops anticipating closeness. Affection becomes routine instead of instinctive. Curiosity disappears. The desire to share thoughts weakens. Eventually, they no longer imagine you as the first person they want beside them during meaningful moments. Nothing explosive happened. Their emotional map simply redrew itself without asking permission. What hurts most is that the person losing love often doesn't look cruel. They may still laugh. They may still care about your well-being. They may still fulfill every visible responsibility. This confuses the person being left because kindness remains while emotional gravity disappears. They mistake politeness for intimacy. They mistake familiarity for connection. They mistake history for love. The relationship becomes something maintained rather than something deeply felt. From the outside, everything appears stable. Inside, it has already become a memory pretending to be the present. There is another psychological shift almost nobody recognizes. People naturally move toward experiences that make them feel emotionally alive. Early love creates constant discovery because every conversation reveals something unknown. Over time, discovery often becomes certainty. Certainty itself isn't the problem. The problem begins when certainty slowly removes curiosity. Once someone believes they already know every emotional response you'll ever have, the relationship stops stimulating their attention. The mind starts functioning on prediction rather than fascination. Nothing feels surprising anymore. The emotional heartbeat becomes quieter, not because love was fake, but because novelty quietly disappeared without either person noticing. Ironically, this is why people often say everything changed even though nothing happened. They aren't describing one event. They're describing the absence of emotional movement. Human emotions were never designed to survive entirely on repetition. We become emotionally attached not only to people but to the feeling they create inside our nervous system. When that feeling gradually becomes emotionally flat, the brain begins searching for stimulation elsewhere, not necessarily another person, but another version of life where it can still feel emotionally awake. The tragedy is that the partner who still loves deeply usually responds in exactly the opposite way. They notice distance and instinctively move closer. They speak more, care more, explain more, reassure more. Every action is driven by fear of losing what already feels unstable. Yet psychological attraction rarely grows from emotional panic. The more desperately someone tries to recreate yesterday's closeness, the more obvious today's distance becomes. Every attempt accidentally reminds the other person that something no longer feels natural. The relationship slowly becomes centered around preserving love instead of experiencing it. This creates one of the cruelest emotional illusions. The more effort you invest, the more invisible your effort becomes. At first, extra affection feels meaningful because it appears unexpected. Later, it becomes expected. Eventually, it becomes background noise. Human psychology adapts to consistency with incredible speed. What once felt precious slowly becomes psychologically ordinary. Not because it lacks value, but because the brain quietly stops noticing what arrives without uncertainty. Familiarity doesn't always destroy love, but it can slowly erase emotional awareness if nothing continues to surprise the mind. Some relationships never collapse because of hatred. They collapse because one person's internal emotional world quietly stopped expanding. Conversations become practical instead of revealing. Shared moments become habits instead of discoveries. The relationship continues physically while ending psychologically. Every routine survives, yet almost every feeling slowly fades. This is why people often describe emotional distance as impossible to explain. There is no single memory to blame. There is only the haunting realization that someone gradually stopped arriving emotionally while never actually leaving physically. Perhaps the most painful stage comes next. Once emotional detachment reaches a certain point, the brain begins editing memories differently. Experiences that once felt beautiful lose emotional intensity. Arguments appear larger than they once did. Happy moments become less emotionally accessible. Psychologists call this memory reconstruction. The present emotion reshapes the past. Someone who is emotionally detached begins remembering the relationship through a colder emotional filter. To you, those memories still feel alive. To them, they already belong to another lifetime. That explains why their goodbye often feels strangely calm. You expect heartbreak because your emotional timeline still exists inside the relationship. Their emotional timeline ended much earlier. They already mourned while standing beside you. They already processed the distance while sharing ordinary days. By the time silence finally reaches your ears, they have spent months adapting to it internally. What feels sudden to you feels delayed to them. Two people experience the same ending from completely different calendars. People often search endlessly for the exact sentence that destroyed everything. They replay conversations, searching for hidden meanings. They examine every disagreement, every awkward moment, every imperfect day. But emotional erosion rarely works like a broken glass. It works like water against stone. No individual drop appears powerful enough to matter. Yet thousands of unnoticed drops eventually reshape the entire surface. Love usually doesn't disappear because of one unforgettable mistake. It disappears because emotional neglect accumulates quietly enough that neither person realizes the damage while it is happening. There is something even darker hidden beneath this process. Human beings naturally crave emotional significance. We need to feel that our presence changes another person's emotional world. Once someone unconsciously begins feeling emotionally replaceable inside a relationship, their attachment quietly weakens. It isn't always about finding someone else. It is about no longer experiencing the relationship as psychologically meaningful. They stop feeling transformed by your presence. Without realizing it, they stop emotionally reaching toward you because reaching no longer feels necessary. That is why silence becomes louder than arguments. Arguments still require emotional investment. Indifference requires almost none. When someone argues, frustration still proves they are emotionally engaged. But when emotional withdrawal replaces emotional conflict, something far more dangerous has happened. The relationship has stopped activating enough emotional energy to even fight for itself. Calmness, in these moments, is often misunderstood as peace when it is actually emotional absence wearing a peaceful disguise. Looking back, you eventually notice details that once seemed meaningless. The pauses became longer. The excitement became quieter. Their eyes wandered elsewhere during ordinary moments. Shared experiences stopped creating stories worth remembering. They weren't rejecting you with dramatic cruelty. They were slowly becoming emotionally unavailable in ways too subtle for love to recognize until it was already too late. Every memory now feels different because hindsight illuminates signals that hope deliberately ignored. And maybe that is the hardest realization of all. Love does not always end with betrayal. Sometimes it ends with emotional gravity slowly disappearing until two people are standing inches apart while living in completely different psychological realities. One person still believes tomorrow will repair today. The other quietly stopped imagining tomorrow together long ago. Neither of them can point to the exact second everything changed because there wasn't one. There were thousands of ordinary moments where affection slowly lost its emotional weight until silence finally became the loudest thing left between them. Perhaps that is why some endings haunt us for years. We were never searching for the person who left. We were searching for the invisible moment when they stopped choosing us, hoping that if we could somehow find it, we could rewrite it. But that moment doesn't exist as a single memory. It exists as a slow disappearance, hidden inside ordinary days that looked completely harmless while they were happening. And that is the cruelest truth about silent endings. By the time you realize love has stopped speaking, it has already been whispering its goodbye for far longer than either of you ever understood.